Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. Hello, and welcome back to True Crime Connections Advocacy Podcast. My name is Tiffany, and I'm your host. Today, I'm here with Shaun Coffee, who is a certified recovery support worker in New Hampshire. And you got a lot of stuff to talk about with us today, so welcome.
Thank you so much.
You are also the author of the book, Boys Do Cry. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Because real men cry.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. It came from this woman in the UK. She is amazing, but she did a woman's version of this book. And I had a friend of mine that was in it, and she was like, you should really reach out to her. So I did. And honestly, I think like I was working in substance use a little bit, but the book really like catapulted me into the field, and also was the spark that kind of started making me look inward, and really trying to figure out who I was. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, I didn't really know. I didn't find out for a while after that book, but it was that seed, and it kind of feedback from it was just like men who I've known for a long time who just cried, or who just were like, dude, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, okay, now I know I'm onto something. So we're actually working together now on a new book. And it's the Boys Do Cry was like a compilation, or like it was like 12 guys. And this one is pretty much just myself. So we're still, she's sticking around.
Sometimes that's all it takes, is to kind of somebody else to share what either they were going through or something that's happened to them. And you're like, oh shit, I can identify with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then down the rabbit hole you go.
I needed somebody to push me to kind of, again, taboo, but like to light the spark, right? Because I grew up in a household where showing emotion was something that you did not do. And if you did do it, the repercussions for that intensified, tenfold. And so I'm 30 at this point. I'm in my 30s, and I can't even identify like sadness. I can't identify that something hurt my feelings, and that's why I'm angry. All I knew was like this secondary emotion is like my home. Like I'm angry all the time. It doesn't matter if something before that startled me or made me sad. It was just like, F you, I'm angry. Like, and that's it. I believe that was a result of me trying to show emotion, and it being met with that kind of abrasiveness from a caregiver. And that's one of these things that's like, the person that's supposed to love you the most and show you this outpouring of affection and teach you how to show emotion and how to process and everything. This guy was just like a board, it was just like, there was nothing. And that's how I learned how to be. And I am a very empathic, very sensitive person. So growing up, not having an outlet to do any of that, when I was able to write, I was like, man, this is great. I get this all out. And it's crazy to even say, but the books actually help me just as much as I hope they help other people. So
that's the beauty of it. So many authors that I've had on my show, they all say, like, literally, a lot of it was like their saving grace in a sense.
Mm.
That's another way that they were actually able to pull out emotions that they forgot or didn't even know that they had.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in therapy now, gosh, I think like 4 or 5 years, and this guy is unbelievable. And I've just come into myself, figured out emotions, like in his office, and he's like, how do you feel? And when I first started with him, I was like, I'm fucking pissed, like whatever. And he's like, okay, let's back up. And now it's like, he's like, how do you feel? And I'm like, when this happened, I felt hurt. And then this happened and this happened. And it's just like mind blowing that, even my parents, they're just like, who are you? But it's like when you say like, you're just tired of being sick, or you just go get help, because it's like that rock bottom. And this was just like, I felt like this for so long, that actually being able to say like, I feel hurt or I felt anxious, it takes away that I'm angry, but also it makes me dive more into myself. Like, okay, like this situation happened and you felt hurt, but like, what were the precursor emotions and stuff? And so it's a wild ride, right? Because like this little kid from some podunk town in New Hampshire who had a really like rough upbringing is now like, I feel like on a rocket ship of like self exploration. It's crazy. So sometimes I can't even really put into words, but like through the podcasts, through the books, I chose to get out of the field for a little while, and maybe we'll talk about that later. But I'm still connected to it, and really, it was like I'm going through my own stuff, but now I'm working with clients, and I'm having to go through their stuff. And when I figured out after 10 years of that, like, okay, I need a break, the most amount of growth for me has happened in this last year, and so it's even better than it was. I just told you 3 minutes ago. So it's crazy, just like when you open your mind up to like change. And like I forget who said this, and I know Tony Robbins did, but I don't think he said like the thing, but like change happens when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change, right? I know that's a lot, but when you get so fed up with hurt that change seems like a better option, then you do change, and you're like, man, why didn't I do this before? And that's that old like hindsight's 2020 kind of thing.
Oh, for sure. The important thing is once you start, don't stop.
Yeah. And I mean, I tell clients too, it's okay to stop, and it's okay to look into your past. But I just say like, go back there to find out what you need for right now, but don't stay there. Cause you'll just end up, going backwards. So live your life a footstep at a time. That's like one of my mantras.
I like that. Was your father a military man by any chance?
He was in the Air Force in the late 70s, early 80s. He had I want to say it was schizoaffective, which back then was like a mixture of bipolar and manic depression. And now they just call that bipolar 1 and 2. It's just like lumped in, right? But he had schizophrenic episodes with bipolar, and then there was that manic. And so you can imagine trying to live with somebody, or somebody in that capacity is trying to teach you how to be a productive member of society, but yeah, he was actually getting medicine. I don't know if he got kicked out. I'm not really sure that worked, but I know he was getting medicine shipped in like on the down low. He wanted to be a pilot, and yeah. So well, we lived in Washington then. My parents split up around like age 2, and then we moved over to the East Coast, and I've been out here pretty much ever since.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely probably not the best person to take advice from, because they're hearing shit and seeing shit, and it's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. But the flip side of that is I did learn a lot from him. I learned what not to do. I learned how to not raise a child. I learned that even somebody who has significant mental health challenges can still be loved by, somebody. And that was like probably one of the biggest things for me growing up, was like a love-hate relationship. There's so many lessons that taught me, just, I spoke about it just a second ago, but I would ask myself all the time, how does this guy who's supposed to be like the person who takes care of me doing these things, like it was all like physical abuse and, emotional and mental abuse. And I mean, I remember even growing up, like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And I'm like 7 years old. And I'm like, why are you an adult? Like, and just like, not knowing which way is up sometimes. And he would have these ways with you that just, he could demoralize your soul in such a way that was so bad. And then 3 minutes later, it would be like, oh, I'm sorry, I love you again, And so I learned this whole push pull. To say that I've ever had a positive relationship, even friends or whatever, that's a far cry, because to me, relationships were always one-sided. And with my dad, I was always waiting for that shoe to drop. And it was just like, oh, something's so good, like I got to run away from it. So platonic relationships, I mean, I'm in a relationship right now, and this is the only successful relationship I could say in my 44 years that I've ever had. And it's due to therapy and all these other things. But it's crazy the amount of relational trauma that people don't even really know that they have. And you could think that your parents were great and you live in an affluent area and you can have so much relationship trauma, you just don't know it. So it's actually been fun to try to unravel that. And my girlfriend and I have really good communication now, but it's almost like a game. It's like, oh man, I can't believe I reacted that way. Why did I do that? And then it's a back and forth, and then she's got therapy and I have therapy. So we, do the separate things, but I can finally say, like, all the podcasts and the books and like the work and all that, it's paying off, because I used to talk a big game, right? Because when you're so used to appearing okay on the outside, you could trick the trickers, like you're really good at bullshitting. And so I could be in the worst episode or the worst moment in my life, and you would have no idea, because I've had to put on the mask, the whole time. Where now I'm like, I put this mask over here, like I'm really hurt. Like, how do I, fix this? So it's a little bit different, but it's actually, it's really cool when you can pick and choose what you want to do, or how you are, how you present yourself. And now I'm okay with just being like, man, I've had a really shitty day. Like, I need a little bit, or, I need some extra support. And like, that's stuff that I never used to do. I never used to ask. It was always waited for people to reach out. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. And they're like, just take it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. It's the whole push pull thing. But now it's like, I can actually stand up for my needs and speak up and not be afraid. And the biggest catalyst for that was my therapist said, like, out of everything, words aren't going to physically hurt you. When you get in an argument with somebody, either at work or at home, or my daughter or whatever, I used to shy away from arguments or not say anything just to avoid conflict. And that was my thing. And now it's like, I can say, like, hey, like, something's a little off, or this doesn't feel right. And I don't feel like that shoe's going to drop.
You have to, because if not, it just builds and builds and builds. And then eventually, there's a spill on the floor and you freaking go batshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I actually do.
Yeah, me too. So you had said that you were homeless for a good chunk of the time.
A long time.
How did that come to about? Like,
so the short version of that is, I got removed from the military forcefully. That was the nice way to put it. And I had gone back to Colorado, where my dad was living, and realized very quickly that that time away, I was like, man, I never want to live with this guy again. Like, here's my time and space. So I came back I'm in New Hampshire now, but I came back, and shortly after I moved to New Hampshire, my dad got sick, and he had passed away, and I moved back to Colorado to take care of all of his stuff. All of his stuff came with a $50,000 life insurance policy, and a 21-year-old kid who never got taught how to do anything with finances was like those stars, like the commercial, like the cartoons. I was like, yes, so 50 grand. I had a fleeting thought that, like, maybe you should put this away or buy a house. But then I was like, it's a really weird feeling, right? Because I love to hate him just from our past. But when he passed away, I was like, fuck, like I love that guy, like there's all these mixed emotions. And I had nobody at that point, or I thought I did. And so I went downtown Colorado Springs, the wrong area. And that started my my harder drug use. Up to that point, it was probably like weed and alcohol, maybe cocaine here and there. But with 50 grand, you can buy whatever you want, I walked to the back of an 18-wheeler in Pueblo, Colorado, and banged on the back of it. And this guy dropped off 3 pounds of meth. And I started my drug career, I guess you would say, with 3 pounds of meth, which turned into heroin and crack. And it's probably easier for you to say stuff, like for me to tell you stuff that I haven't done. But that whole time I was searching, right? I was searching for something that was going to take this pain away. I was still looking to take the pain away from childhood. I didn't even want to think about this guy dying, because I was still messed up from growing up, and I ended up in a closet at the, like a real closet, but I ended up in this closet in these people were looking for me. Same people that I got the drugs from, and my girlfriend at the time kind of thwarted them. And she came to that closet after they had left and was like, you got to get out of here. And so I took a bus back to New Hampshire. I was okay for about a year, found out that I was a really good DJ. And, of course, being in clubs all the time came alcohol, and then rave drugs and ecstasy and ketamine and all this other stuff. So that was like a 4-year relapse. And I started to get really good. And this guy was like, if you want to be serious about it, you got to stop using. And at that point I had already tasted what recovery felt like. And I was just like, this isn't worth it. Like and so I smoked weed here and there, never really drank again. But 2008 was like the year that I kind of pulled my head out, and I was like, this is not good. And, 2000, I lived in transitional housing, but the homelessness really started in Colorado when I had gotten that money. And you'd think like I was hotel hopping, I was doing all these things, but I didn't have a home base. I didn't have a house. I didn't, it was like safe houses or trap houses or, different stuff. And, when I came back to New Hampshire, this New Hampshire is very veteran focused. And there was a program here for veterans that gave you 2 years in a homeless shelter pretty much. And that's where I've got my first substance use job. And they're like, well, you're sober, you're doing really good. How about you try to help other people? And I was like, okay, not even thinking that I was like a put together. I shouldn't never have been helping other people in that state. Right. I mean, I was already sober, so that wasn't the problem, but it's like, you ever see a baby try to teach a baby how to walk? It's like, it doesn't happen. And that's really, right? That's what I felt like. Right. I'm like, it's like the blind leading the blind. I've read books. I can talk very well. I speak very well because of the way that I had to carry myself and just the multiple situations I had to get myself in and out of. So I faked it to make it for a while. But yeah, New Hampshire gave me, this classification that was called, chronically homeless. And when you're chronically homeless in this state, they just roll out the table. And so I got a housing voucher through the VA, that basically was a housing first model. I don't know if you guys have that where you are, but it basically means that they do whatever they can do to house you. So I was late like 4 or 5 months on rent. They never kicked me out. They worked on it and said, this is how you do these things. They taught me life skills. And then 2020, I actually ended up being a case manager in that transitional housing that got me on my feet. So it's all, full circle. But yeah, about 10 or 12 years, I couch surfed or hotel hopped or slept outside.
Very sorry to hear about your dad, first of all. I'm sorry to hear that. That's,
rough. Yeah. So many people talk to me about it, and I just say, like, I hate to say this, but when he passed away, our relationship was so tumultuous that it was actually more of a godsend than anything else. Like that, at that point I could breathe, I could grow, I could be myself. I didn't have to live under his thumb. I wasn't his kid anymore. I was my own person. And that really helped. But you're going to ask what he passed away from?
No, actually, I was going to ask what happened to your mother.
Oh, so she and my dad split. Of course, I know now a lot more than I did before. So their home life was very bad, worse than he ever, led me on. But he and her split up. I think around 5, and we moved, and my dad did everything in his power to keep her away from me. So I would say from 5 years old to 23, I may have seen her 3 months.
Oh, wow.
That whole time. And he was just like, your mom doesn't want to see you. Your mom doesn't want to, plane tickets. He took me to the airport one time and made it seem like he bought the tickets. But when we got to the airport, he's like, we had to leave the airport. It was just weird stuff. But he was so vindictive and so mean and so angry towards her for whatever reason, and nobody will ever know, that he wanted to make her life hell. And the only way that he could do it was by putting me in between both of them. How this guy got physical sole custody of me is beyond comprehension. But I mean, in talking to my mom, we have the most amazing relationship now. My stepdad is more of a dad than, my real dad was. This guy, I've heard stories of them, my mom and my dad doing drop-offs, and my stepdad being at the side of the house in the bushes, like making sure nothing happened. Like, he's that kind of dude. My dad basically kidnapped me on a visitation, took me from Washington to Oregon. 3 days later, the sheriff showed up. My stepdad was right there. Like, he was the one that went into the campground and was like, what the fuck, so it's a great relationship now, but yeah, we both got kind of separated, and it's like, you're like this, like, dad's over here, mom's over here, you're just split apart. And it's like, when you're with your mom, you got to talk shit about your dad, and when you're with your dad, you take shit about your mom. Very confusing for me, because I didn't know, who am I supposed to love? Like, I hate my mom at this point, because like I'm thinking from his words, she's doing this on purpose. Come to find out, when I'm 23 and my dad passed away when 21, but we really started talking a couple years after that. And I just had to really say, like, I'm sorry. But I told her how I really felt, and she was like, I don't blame you. Like, you've been told this one thing this whole time. Childhood trauma sucks. It's and to me, I didn't even know the word trauma. I didn't even think it was trauma. I just thought, like, man, I'm just this jacked up kid who just has this shitty life, and like, I just got to put my bootstraps on, pick them up, and go. And thank God for this mental health boom, because I'm like, now I understand myself.
100%.
Pod match too, because like, just coming on these pods and just talking about this stuff is just like, you get so much more out of that as well. But yeah, so she and I have had, since I was 25, been rebuilding that. There was a point where my sister and my mom had a daughter from marriage previous, and we used to be inseparable. And there was a 14-year period where we didn't talk. And I used to tell my mom all the time, if I do anything in my life, it's going to be like, get the relationship back with my sister. A couple of years ago, we were doing vacation, and we just exchanged numbers, started talking. And now my sister and I even have like a relationship. And so it's just like, slowly but surely, things are happening. But yeah.
Well, it's so important. You need that. You do.
Yeah. And I mean, even now, like, sometimes we go a month or two without talking, and I'm like, shit, hey, how you doing? I'm really sorry, but that, we get it. Like, it's just how it is. They live in Washington. They actually back in Washington. And then I have a stepbrother as well. So we're kind of all split apart, but we talk, more than we ever have. So.
Well, that's great. Makes my heart happy. So what does your life look like now that you've been going to therapy, you've been helping other people? Like, what worked for you the best, and what did you try that did not work at all?
The biggest thing for me was that I was able to let go of substances fairly easy. I mean, I chose to get sober in the early 2000s, so they didn't have like, couldn't look for a rehab. You could look for a therapist, but I was like, I'm not going to see one of those crazy freaks. It's like $80,000 just to sit there and drink coffee and tell me that I'm fucked up. Like, I know. And I told my therapist this too, and he was just like, "How do you feel about it now?" And I'm like, "Man, was I wrong?" But the single most greatest thing I did was forgive myself, and that's where it started. And forgiving myself, I'm going to get emotional, but forgiving myself for the way that I spoke to myself, and the many times that I was just super confused and I had no idea. I finally just said to myself, like it's okay. Like you know, you did the best that you could, and I can't go back there. Nobody can go. You can't go back and change me. You can't go back and change you. And so that's the second thing, is realizing that and this still I have trouble with, but I have to be in right now. I have to live today. I can't live from yesterday. For most things, you can live for tomorrow. You know, like, what am I going to have for dinner? Like, am I going to go on vacation? But like, to be honest, like those relationship like arguments, they pop up, or disagreements with friends or whatever, they pop up in the minute, and you're just like, okay, like now I can say, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to think about this. Like I can apologize. You know, there's so many different things that I know. So forgiving myself, you know, was big. And then therapy, I bit the bullet, and I was just like, my therapist was like, man, when you first came here, we couldn't have a 10-minute conversation. You were just everywhere. And I screw this up all the time, but he's saying objective, and I used to be subjective. So he would say, like, you hover above this conversation, and like, you don't go down, you don't get into it. It's like, I'm asking you how you're feeling. You're like, well, you know, so yesterday, you know, it's like, oh, squirrel. But he's got me to calm down, and I went through medicine, and this is probably the third or fourth thing, is that I used medicine the way that I believed it was supposed to be used. And I learned the skills. I had a toolbox. I said, I don't like it when this happens. How do I fix it? And I've been able, probably 4 or 5 medicines I've been on. And I haven't been on a medicine for a year. And so that's the other thing. Like, some people will need to be on it for a while. And that's cool. But I think with the way that the drug market and pharma and the push for, you know, like this, people are monopolizing this mental health thing. And it's like, if I can teach you how to react, or that's the wrong one. If I can teach you how to to respond. My mom is going to talk to me about that later. But, to respond, right, and not react. Or I can say, like, a breathing technique, or motivational interview yourself, or just these different things that we can do. Like, I can understand chemical imbalance, but if you understand why you're doing the things that you're doing, and how to not do them, the medication can honestly, like, it can go away. I mean, there's a time and place for it. That's for sure. Like, I was depressed for a long time. And I had an anxiety attack the other day, but they go from lasting a week and to now, like, I can get out of one in like 40 minutes, or even faster. It just depends. But like, it's like sitting down, breathing, you know, doing the senses, like all these small little things. So therapy's huge. And then even above all that, like hovering above all these things, is community, for me.
Community is huge.
Which I used to be a loner. I was by myself. And I was just like, how do I do this?
You can't. You cannot do it alone. You can't.
100%. 100%. And asking for help. I mean, God, we could do another 42 minutes on just like the things that you can do to get out of these things. So therapy, and then just, I did so much research. Like, why, like on Google, like, why do I respond this way? Why do I react that way? This isn't a plug either, but there's an app called Rosebud, and I would love all of your listeners to know this, because it's an AI. So I talk to it like, it's a journaling app, right? And instead of me you can set it up to where it's just the prompts and you just use it as a journal. But I could say, like, Tiffany called me an asshole today, and I don't know how to deal with it. And it would literally say, wow, that sounds like you had a hard day. I commend you for responding the way that you did. Or, but it has a conversation with you. It's validating, and it's kind of like bolsters good communication and thought processes. And it's crazy, but it's like $4.99. And, I downloaded it. I started to use it when I don't have therapy, right? Cause I can't just call him and be like, hey, I need you for 2 hours. So in lieu of that, I said, well, okay, I'm just going to use this app now. And it was just to journal at first. And then when I figured out how lucrative it was, I showed it to my girlfriend and she was like, yeah, you've actually sounded different. And like the way that you're responding. And I'm like, yeah, it's right here. Now she has it. And when she doesn't have therapy and we'll sit in the same room and just be like, we're having trouble conversating and we will just journal in this app. And all of a sudden there's like this magical conversation that's like, wow, it was really that easy. So yeah, journaling, anything mental health, but if they're going to take first steps, I would honestly say be forgiving to yourself, find help, even if it's a friend at first, even if you have to have 50 people talk you into going into therapy. Like I was this big proponent of like, I'm not going to therapy. I'm not, my mom would be like, you need therapy. I'm like, fuck you. I'm not doing this. Like that's a lot of money just to sit on a couch. But the guy literally changed my life. And now I tell everybody like, you should probably go to therapy. Like, so that's.
Do you have a story of survival?
A parent goes to residential school. You know, they haven't had that family connection. Those traditional values and ceremonies that many of us exposed to are taken.
Or have a lost loved one that was involved in human trafficking, exploitation, missing, or murdered? My name is Jasmine Castillo, and I am the host of Hands Off My podcast that brings to the forefront, specifically from Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Black Indigenous people of color.
Anderson County 911, what's the location of your emergency? Ma'am, what's going on out there? You saying a baby's missing and nobody...
As well as nonprofit organizations.
When I was a private investigator 5 years ago, we picked up a case that was Shanice Harris' case.
That help and advocate families of lost loved ones with their closure.
From sometime from his shift at work to that next day, he was either robbed or apprehended at some point with someone coming into the restaurant.
And opening a cold case.
So that, to me, was his way out. And it negatively impacted Armani's investigation.
Please join me on Thursdays on any podcast platform wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are voiceless no more.
Was he your first therapist? Because so many people will try one, and then if they don't like it, they're like, oh, they're all that way. And it's like, no. Try again.
I went through 5.
Okay, see?
Yeah. I sat and you know, it was the crappiest part was like, I relived all this trauma, right? They do a thing called a biopsychosocial, which is like when you first sit in there, they go through how were you at age 2? I don't know. Like, when's the first memory? Like age 7, which I found out a lot of people's memories started at age 7, which was really weird. But you go through this whole thing about your high school and your background. And then they're like, okay, now we can do therapy. So like, I go to this one guy and I'm like, he's really old. He sounds like he's reading out of a Britannica, like an encyclopedia, you know, like he was just a really old guy. And then I had a female and I figured out that like now I could see a female, I think. But when I was doing that, when I first started, I still had like animosity towards women because of the whole upbringing. So, but yeah, like for all the people listening, like it's not going to work. It may not work out the first time. And if you're an addict, you know that it takes at least 5 or 7 times before you may actually really grasp the idea that sobriety is something that you want. So don't get discouraged. Cause like I said, it took me almost 6 months and 5 different therapists to find this guy. And then I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And luckily I held on to the right one.
That's great. Right. I always try to tell people you cannot give up just because somebody doesn't fit. There's so many different other ones. There's so many different modalities. There's so many different things to try. You can't just throw in the towel the first time. And don't go and not be honest. That's the worst thing you could do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can sit in his office and say like, dude, I bamboozled you the first 3 months. Like I manipulated the shit out of you. And like, I apologize for that. I don't do that anymore. But like, where did we grow up from? You know, but the going back to the therapist and like not giving up, like the thing that helped me was like, if I stop this, I'm not giving up on him. I'm giving up on myself. And I've given up on myself for my entire life. And I'm not down with that anymore. It's just not conducive to me growing. So like, if you don't like me, you're screwed because I'm staying in the seat. I mean, I moved away to Florida like shortly after COVID for a few months because I had to go through some mental health stuff, and I chose to go down to I lived in Palm Bay for 5 or 6 months, and then I came back, and through that whole time he was able to do video and and everything else. So he is, I would single-handedly say that I could definitely credit him for changing my life, and he would say you could credit yourself because I didn't do the work, I just showed you the map to get there. So thanks a lot, Herb. But yeah, the and then I guess the things that didn't work were just trying to do everything myself, right? I don't have all the answers, but I've told myself that my entire life. So you have to have them there somewhere. Like, go through all these things. Well, drugs proved that they're not the best because they only hide things until you're done being high, and then you have to go back and I haven't really, I don't think I can't recollect like a lot of different things that I've tried, because it's almost like this ball that just bounces inside of you, and you can't go out anywhere. And everything that I knew how to do was internal. So maybe that's the other thing, is try to look externally. This book that I'm working on now, the concept of it is that everybody carries around a backpack full of trauma, and they continue to throw crap back there. Well, that gets heavy and you can't move. So you take stuff out, you throw it on the side of you, and you keep walking, but then you realize like you still have to turn around and pick all that shit up and deal with it, because like it's still there. Like there's no, it's not like a hole in the bottom, but I did find out that the bottom of that backpack is where the power to transcend your life is, right? Like, so it's about taking these experiences and looking at them at face value, figuring out how to work through them so that they don't have to go back in there. And you have more room to put more in at the end of it. But that's literally what the book is about. So it's, and it's just like I guess kind of my journey through taking this stuff out of my backpack to where I feel the lightest that I've ever felt. So I can't really say that I've done a lot of stuff that didn't work. Just the stuff that I chose was like masking. And so I would say that's the biggest thing. Like, don't mask it. Like, realize there's a problem, then say that there's a problem. Don't lie to yourself, because if you lie to yourself, you're going to lie to everybody else. And a lot of people that are going through addiction and trauma, that they are professional liars, because we have to, right? We don't want everybody to know what's going on or whatever else, but like, be true to yourself. And that's what I can say to kind of start that journey, is just forgive and keep going.
Recognize.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. That's the hardest part, when you got to look at yourself and be like, wow, you know what? I really have been through some shit.
Mm-hmm.
And to really do analyze it, because it's going to actually teach you so much about yourself, why you do the things you do, why you might act the way you act, why you say the shit you say.
Yeah.
It's like your aha moment. Like, oh shit, that's where that came from. So you need that. You have to.
100%. Yeah. And it's you have a million of those aha moments, and you realize that like, okay, there's a million more, and now it becomes like, where's the next one? Like, when you start this journey, and I can tell you wholeheartedly, whenever I first identified the first emotion in the therapist's office by myself, I wanted to stand up and do a backflip. I would have ended up in the hospital, so I didn't, but I was so happy, like, just with myself. Like, it was, I think it was like, I thought my first emotion was anger, but it was actually that something that made me anxious. And I got mad because I in a split second, I just got startled, and I was like, whoa, I was mad. But like, once we unpacked it, I was scared at first, and being scared caused me to be pissed off. And then I was like, oh, but I identified my first emotion, and I can guarantee you that when you get in there even if you don't go to therapy, like talk to your friends or whatever. But when you start this journey and like things just start to go good, it's like you want to sprint, you know, you can't obviously because it's a very like, it's a crazy windy road that just, you know, like you don't know which turns are next, but like
that becomes your new addiction.
Right. Like thriving off of those moments. Like I tell my best friend, I'm like 42. I'm like, dude, I'm sad. I'm like, yes, I'm sad. And we're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm sad. It's like a movie, like the rain is coming down and I'm just so excited. And I'm just like, I'm sad. But for somebody who's never been able to do that, it's like liberating, you know?
Yes.
So yeah, you just ride the coattails of your own success. And that's basically what's taken me through the last 6 years.
Isn't growth amazing?
Yeah, totally. Because it's not only is it amazing, it's contagious. And I found that out. Like people see you taking steps and then they see you at like a bad moment and you took 15 steps backwards, but then you jumped those 15 and you moved another 10 and they're just like, how? It's like, I grew resilience somewhere. I don't know. Like, well, yeah, you grew up in your childhood. You just didn't realize it. And so like, for everybody listening, like you're so much stronger than you think. And like this rubber band is so much stronger than you think it is. And like when you pull it back, you will shoot yourself forward. And like you have to be prepared for that. But I promise you, like walking through your own shit and coming out on the other side is the most amazing thing that you could possibly do for yourself and do for the people that love you. And that's just my little piece of heaven, I guess.
I don't think I could have said that any better. Yeah, I mean, and you deserve it. Everyone deserves to be happy and to be an active member in society and to be loved. You know, that's what everybody wants and that's what everybody deserves.
Yeah. You know, it's hard to talk to kids about trauma, especially in like high school or something, you know. And it's not hard, but it's a little bit like you can't, you know, go too far. But I've started a speaking business and sort of with this writing aside, and I go to high schools and colleges, and then I do compassion fatigue and burnout for like clinicians and stuff.
I love that.
And that I think that's like the biggest give back for me, because I know that if I went through it and then I'm talking to say a 11th grade class with 250 kids, there has to be at least 40 of them that are going through something pretty similar and not talking about it and not telling their friends. And it's just like, that's why I do it, because they know like, okay, I'm going through it right now, but like there's lights. Or for that hour that I'm talking, like somebody, you can tell too, because they joking around with their friends and you say something that catches them and they're just like, you know, like attentive. And prevention is where I think I should have been the whole time. And so now that's really kind of where my focus is. And it's just giving these lessons back to kids who don't have a voice, because I went through a Department of Child and Family Services, and granted it was in the late 80s when they were like, we don't give a crap about kids, like what are you talking about? Because we went through there 3 times and they just said it was horseplay. That's the other thing too, is that like, what do you do when like the people that are being paid to keep you safe are just like, oh, your dad's just joking with you, it's all right, you know? But prevention to me is huge, because I can reach 1 million people that are using substances and it's great. But like getting to a kid who doesn't have a voice, or who's dealing with that same crap that I dealt with at home, who can't say anything or who can't get out of it, they can now see like it does happen to other people. And maybe I do give them the power to go and say something to the guidance counselor, or hopefully not to stand up to their, you know, their parent, but at least drop the knowledge for them and just kind of like be a support from afar, I guess. So yeah.
I love that, because it's so important. And that's kind of like where I've started going with the podcast as well, is let's stop it before it starts. Because, I mean, like the saying, hurt people hurt people. So that's why we have all these people walking around shooting up shit, and they're hurt. They're hurt for some reason, and they never dealt with what is hurting them. So if we can start healing people at a young age, that's going to prevent a lot of this craziness.
I agree. And on the backside of that, I tell people, like, so many people, like, oh, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Like, oh, okay, well, text me later. What the fuck is that going to do? Like, well, on Facebook, somebody's like having an issue, and you see 42 comments that are like, oh, reach out when like, I'm always here. Reach out when you need me. Like, why do we stop reaching out or telling people to reach out? And why don't we reach in? Like that's the whole thing. Like, I'll stop right at that point and call them if I have their number, or instant message them and say, here's my number. You can call me at any time. Like, I get calls at 3:00 in the morning sometimes, and I'm really sorry. Like, don't worry about it. It's okay. Like, for that moment, like, I know that you're getting stuff off your chest, but like, there's just this culture of like, reach out if you need anything. And it's like, I do. And I'm fucking telling you I do. And you're like, you expect me in my darkest time to be like, hey, George, I have a problem. And it's just like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. That post is them reaching out in a sense,
Right. Yeah. And then the last piece, I think, is just like, I tell people all the time too, is just so many people have stigma, or they have an idea of what a homeless person looks like, or how they act. And it's like, they're all drug addicts. They all live on the street. They all there's a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness in my town, and they have degrees, and it's like, you just never know what someone's going through. So I always say, like, be a part of the solution. You're on Facebook and these social medias and telling all these people like all this crazy shit about how bad substances are in your neighborhood and people dropping needles. And have you ever stopped and talked to one of them? Have you ever found out the story of somebody who probably is going through something similar that you may have gone through in a period of time in your life, that you made it through, that you could literally just sit down for 5 minutes and speak to them and give them your 2 cents and walk away from it and feel like you did something, rather than looking down your nose at them saying what pieces of shit they are? Like, it just, I don't know, but that's just me, because there's a lot of it in our area. And you see it all the time, and people are just kind of naive to it, or you don't give them money, that you know what they're going to do with it. Yeah, maybe. But on the off chance that the guy's telling me the truth, and he goes to the McDonald's and buys 15 burgers for him and his homeless people that are at the camp, like, so I don't know what they do with it after I give it to them, but I know that if they do go and do what they say they're going to do, or, I did something, and it's coming from a place of like, when I said I needed $5 for food, like, that's what I used it for. I wasn't like, I wasn't using drugs at that point. I just was lazy, and that's God's honest truth. And if I can get by off of mooching off of other people at this point, and not having to take responsibility for myself, that's what I'm going to do. But when you become that productive member of society, and you learn that these things, like, you don't do that shit anymore. And so that's why I say become a part of the solution, because like, I've taken a bunch of people experiencing homelessness to food, to water. And that's where the crazy conversations, like, this is, how did this happen to you? Like, oh my gosh. And they tell you, and that's like, do you know you can go here, like, to this pantry, to the soup kitchen? Like, you've never been to the soup kitchen? It's right down the street. Let's go. Like, that's what I mean about like being a part of the solution, rather than like looking down your nose and just talking shit or sharing with the Karen that lives next door, who also feels the same way that you do. It's just like, it doesn't do anything for anybody. So yeah. I'm getting off that soapbox, but
well, for whatever it may be worth, I am proud of you. Thank
you. I appreciate that. And it takes a long time to say that too, because sometimes you just don't, you don't believe it. And I say this to hosts as well, but like, without people that have your drive and your vision and want to do what you're doing, people like us don't have a voice. I mean, we do, but not on this type of platform where somebody just click a button and listen to rambling for an hour. But my hope is that at some point in the last hour that somebody, one person, 2 people, 5 people, but whatever, but they gravitate towards our words and just realize that like there's a whole world out there and you just really have to go grab it.
Absolutely. It ain't going to come to you.
So just like you're proud of me. I mean, I don't say I'm proud of you, but I'm happy that you chose to do what you're doing, because you're giving people like myself the voice to be able to help shift generations, and that it's unspeakable thanks for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way?
I have a website. It's just ShaunCoffee.com. And then my Instagram is like a willow tree, willows_runner. And that is, it just has, there's just moments where I think of something and I'm like, oh, I'm going to put that down. So I'll find a quote and I'll tie it into something that's happened in my life, or, just like motivational kind of inspiration stuff. The website has a link that you can buy the Boys Do Cry book. I'm glad we didn't talk about that too much, because we tend to do that. And then they're like, well, I don't want to buy it because I just heard everything. But that kind of that whole story in the closet, the backstory of the military and like all that stuff's in there. There are a few other podcasts that you can, listen to, but yeah, just my website and the Instagram pretty much.
Perfect. I'll make sure I put links in the show notes. And was there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I mean, we covered a lot of ground in this time.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story.
Thank you so much.
It's inspirational, and anyone can do it. You just have to put one foot in front of the other.
Yep, absolutely. And until you do it, you're going to keep wishing that you did. And so just make the decision to do something different today than you did yesterday, because it's that very first step into the water, or even dipping your toes in, like somebody's got to push you. It's just a lot easier if you just jump in yourself. So.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
I think we all know somebody who can benefit from this episode. Please make sure to share it with them. And thank you guys so much for listening to my podcast. This really means a lot to me. If one of my episodes has helped you in any way, I would really like to know. It's important for me to know that the work that I'm doing is actually helping people. If you want more of me, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram and TikTok. If you or anyone you know is in need of national hotlines, please go to truecrimeconnections.com. I have all the phone numbers there listed for anything that you could possibly imagine. All right, my Renowned Roots community, keep building hope and gaining strength. Until next time.